25 feet above the hole.
There's a good chance he doesn't get this inside DeMarco's ball.
But I just don't understand why it's become this so divisive thing. Anyway, I do think it will be successful. I think it'll probably be around an NBA rating game is what we'll see.
I think a lot of the divisiveness is because it's the same guys like Rory, Tiger, Billy Horschel, who were somewhat anti-LIV. And you're saying, hey, the team format's not going to work. And what do? They do a team format. You call it exhibition golf, and then also you come up with screen golf. And then you have the gimmicks, the referee, there's a shot clock. It's starting to get very much like, just like what the Netflix Cup did, that you don't want to focus on the golf. So you try to throw on these bells and whistles that actually detract from it. If you just saw, they just had the DJ Khaled video.
Yeah.
Where it's the most cringeworthy thing I've ever seen. He does the Tiger Woods chip on 15 at Augusta or what have you.
Here it comes. Oh my goodness.
And then it's just some computer graphics. He's jumping around. Where he's trying to hype up tomorrow's sports.
Tomorrow's sports. Tomorrow's sports.
And you already see what they think people want, and it's not what people want. Folks, we got another poppin' episode of Big Boy Pants Golf. I've got Jared Dorfler of the Perfect Putt newsletter. Every Monday, this dude drops some serious knowledge. He's a huge star on Twitter already, over 20,000 followers. Jared, thanks for agreeing to come on Big Boy Pants Golf, YouTube's hottest golf channel.
You got it, Pants. You're buttering me up a little bit. I don't know if I'm that big, but I'm happy to be here, chat with you.
I recently was lucky enough to come across this newsletter, and I'm just going through the data. Amazing stuff. We got so much to go through today because this guy, he's a pro. He puts out the best quality stuff. Jared, take a bow, my friend. So let's get into it right now. Things have been crazy in the last 24 hours. We got Jay Monahan putting out a memo saying, hey, the whole merger is still progressing. And then within 15 hours, you got Rory McIlroy throwing in his letter of resignation. What's strange is in that memo from Jay Monahan, he also confirmed that Patrick Cantlay would stay on the board. And we both know that there's some tension between Rory and Patrick Cantlay, as Rory recently came out and called Patrick Cantlay. That's a fact. What is your take on this? I know we're going to get into the whole business topic perspective soon and the overall trends in the industry, including your belief that TGL will be successful.
So we'll take it off from the top here. The memo from Jay, I want to touch on, and then also I kind of want to touch on Rory a little bit. I would love to know, I'm sure everyone would love to know the real answer why he resigned his position on the board. It is a bit coincidental that the board meeting was on Monday and he resigned a dozen or so hours later. This is a little bit of a cop-out answer. It could be absolutely nothing, or there could be a major thing going on there. I think it's a significant story. I just don't know anything to write about or to tweet about. And I haven't seen anything either. So I'm not sure anyone's getting any real information there. But I would lead to believe that it's more significant story just on the timing of everything. Especially when you consider this deal is supposed to be done by December 31. We have 6 weeks to the finish line, and one of the key guys is resigning, would lead me to believe that there's something in there that's more significant going on. Now, on Jay's memo, more of the same, I suppose. I don't know really much. We've seen a lot of memos recently. I suppose it falls in the. I guess players found out about the memo before they had a chance to read it, but I don't know. I'm sure Jason Gore had a busy night fielding calls from a lot of different players. So we'll see if anything comes out on it. I know Rory's close to some media members, so something may come out in the future. But I would probably believe that it's more significant than maybe we think it is.
Well, it's also interesting that after that Rory's resignation, you also have word that the players are actually going to get equity, but there's no specifics as to what that entails at this point. So I know we'll probably defer to you later when you come up with another fancy newsletter breaking it down. But once again, we're kind of flying blind here. But it was interesting that Phil Mickelson picks up on this and basically is like, hey, almost like I told you so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw Phil's tweet there, and no major sports league offers equity to players. I'm not sure the reason behind offering equity. Is it offering equity to the players that were loyal and to the PGA Tour? Is it offering equity to the players to not have them go to LIV? I don't know what the parameters are, but it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
What's also interesting in this whole kind of everything comes in threes and fours is that the TGL SoFi Stadium just collapsed. I know you've done deep analysis about Top Golf, which is non-traditional golf, and you've also done analysis on TGL. Let's get into it. Also considering the fact that, and I think you'll agree with me, the Netflix Cup just flopped.
I didn't watch the Netflix Cup. I didn't know that it was on. And I think that's probably part of the problem. Again, I don't think the Netflix Cup is going after the hardcore golfer from a demo standpoint. If you look at their success they had with both the Full Swing and Drive to Survive, marry those two together, it kind of made sense to pitch and do a pilot, if you will. I'll be curious to see how that did, just from a ratings standpoint. If Netflix releases that, they may not. But yeah, I mean, on the TGL, so their dome collapsed. From my understanding, that's a construction dome. So I don't know if that's really a huge issue. I do not believe that is the dome of the final product. It certainly looks different than the renderings.
In terms of overall, we're taking it right into the TGL. We're going to the non-traditional golf formats. You got, as you pointed out in your newsletter about Callaway Golf, Top Golf is the big performer for Callaway right now. So that would liken the fact that, potentially these non-traditional formats, potentially televised, would be successful. However, Callaway stock is down 49%.
Yeah. So Callaway's had a tough year. They've really had a tough last 2 years. Now the market generally was down last year. So they kind of followed market trend last year. I believe their stock did pop a little bit today. I could check. Nonetheless, they're still down significantly on the year. And if you think about it, it really boils down to the capital expenditure with the top golf locations. By the end of 23, they'll have built 33 or so Top Golf venues since the acquisition, which represents about 40% of all of Top Golf's locations, and Top Golf's 23 years old. So it's required significant capital to scale the market to really get competitors to stay out of it. It's a capital intensive business. It requires anywhere from $20 to $40 million to build. And so they've been dumping a lot of money in there, and they've been able to see same venue growth, which same venue growth means if you have a location in Louisville this year, you'll benchmark that the following year. Same venue growth doesn't include the new venues that they've opened. And it came to a head this quarter with same venue growth. They were down 3%. Now, when they acquired Top Golf, their forecast long term was somewhere around the low to mid single digits of same venue sales growth. So they certainly missed on their expectation. And I think the bigger thing to kind of look at here from a macro standpoint is corporate sales make up around 20% of Top Golf's annual revenue, and their corporate events were down. Corporate event sales were down 17% in the quarter, which drug same venue sales down. So from a macro standpoint, are companies kind of tighten up their belt a little bit from a budget standpoint across the board, or is this specifically a Top Golf thing? Now, Callaway called out the post-COVID surge for corporate sales and how 22 was a great year, so it was tough to benchmark off that. They also had some heat issues in the South, but I probably wouldn't bake that too much in there. They did call it out, but I think it's more of a corporate sales thing for them. And so, when you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on things and you're not showing growth, that's a huge concern for investors. They're doing something about it, okay? So they're kicking a few venues down the developmental pipeline can. So they didn't, at some point, they did forecast how many venues they'll open in 24, but now they forecasted that down to 8 or 9, which will save them about $100 million in capital, which, investors would like to see. They're doing some other OpEx things and maybe cutting some labor here and there to kind of free up some cash. But, when they become free cash flow positive, which they say they will by the end of the year, I think that'll be really beneficial for investors. Now, I want to be clear is that I follow trends in the industry as golf as a whole. I want to see golf do well. I do not think Callaway's stock performance is indicative of the golf industry as a whole. I think it's purely a financial issue with investors on Wall Street not seeing a good enough return back to them with their money. And I think that's really what it boils down to. And if you go further, I think it really boils down to corporate sales. I don't think it's a huge issue. And as I talked about a little bit in a newsletter this week, and I know you want to chat about this too, is a company goes into no man's land when they try to scale, right? And no man's land, there's different definitions, right? No man's land can mean the way that I see it is they've spent so much money to grow that at some point the system has to either work or break. And so they're in this no man's land where it looks like they're not doing well from a financial standpoint, stock standpoint, but they're either going to turn the corner and become more profitable and attain free cash flow positive, or the business will deteriorate. So, I mean, that's the two options when you're in no man's land, when you're trying to scale as quickly as they were. And I'm pretty confident Callaway is going to be just fine.
My question to you that in terms of this case is, now you got a new potential competitor entering the market with Bryson DeChambeau, right? So now they've had this kind of artificial system where they didn't have anyone really rising up to challenge them. Now you got a competitor. That's another X factor you have to consider.
Yeah, of course. And look, I just looked, their stock did pop a little bit today. I'm sure they're happy. They're down 40% on the year now, so not quite as bad, but still markedly underperforming. If we look at competitors, it's just, as I mentioned earlier, it's from a capital standpoint, it requires so much money. And they just acquired Big Shots, which was, as they called out, their biggest competitor, which they owned one venue and leased 3 venues. Another quasi-competitor is Drive Shack. Well, Drive Shack, which Rory McIlroy owns one of their entities, Puttery. Drive Shack is, in my opinion, probably been poorly mismanaged over the last few years. And they have 4 locations as well. But they are not focused on Drive Shack. They're focused on Puttery. So if you look at what Bryson's trying to do in the DFW area, I think there's room in the market. I can tell you that. If Callaway says that they have room for another 100, 150 venues in the United States, DFW is probably a good spot for, and although Topgolf does have several locations there, I don't know what his end goal is, if he wants to scale to more or if he's going to be just happy with kind of this one location.
Well, with Bryson, you don't know, because one second he's putting on 50 pounds of muscle, and then the next thing he's scaling back and getting, like Ryan Gosling body. I don't know. We'll just leave it at that. But this ties into, because this is all non-traditional golf, people experiencing golf off of a traditional golf course. You got your other article, golf simulator industry is worth over $1 billion. You bring up Foresight, Full Swing, SkyTrack, all these saw an explosion during COVID. How about now? COVID's over. You can go outside, masks off, do what you want to do.
I talked to the team at the indoor golf shop on this, and they're one of the largest, if not the largest, retailers in the United States for indoor golf equipment. And so they see a lot of trends. It's just not just one company, right? And what they told me is that they were seeing an uptick before COVID, which I thought was really interesting. There was 2 reasons why. Technology was better, and the price was continuing to come down. And then obviously COVID was a boon for them. People were staying home, working from home, able to go hit some shots in between meetings. It was a big deal. So can it continue to scale out? I would say yes. And here's why. The price is going to continue to come down, which will be beneficial for virtually everybody. If you can spend under $1,000 to have a launch monitor in your garage with a net, that a lot of people will do that. Historically, when I was playing college golf, TrackMan was really it, and they were $30,000, and we didn't have launch monitors. Now my former team, they've got 3 of them, and they're not TrackMans, but they got 3 launch monitors because they're $5,000 now. And so I think the technology will continue to get better. I think the price will come down. It's going to be cyclical, right? But I do believe that we'll continue to see a strong growth in the indoor golf market.
Do you follow the Asian like Korea simulator golf market, because the only time I've really played screen golf was maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And I lived in Korea for 5 years, and it's the only type of golf you can play because regular golf is $300 and everyone's usually has some kind of corporate card. They're expensing it. So no one's really paying for it themselves. So you go down to the basement of some building and you get a couple hard-boiled eggs, you get some weird tea, and now you're playing with your coworkers or maybe your relatives for $35 each. You're into a screen, and it's kind of fun, but it's also kind of depressing because you just wish you were more successful and you played real golf. Also, remember in Korea and probably Japan, people don't know this, there's only 4 months of the year that are decent. Like spring is 4 weeks, fall is 3 weeks, and then even when it's supposed to be nice, when you compare it to, like, let's say the Northeast, then you got like 30 days of rain or you got yellow dust kicking around. So you're kind of forced to be indoors in some of the worst weather you've ever seen. So I can understand in that market where you've made it, it's economically not feasible in terms of the high rent, the cost of everything, to also go pay $300 for your round when these people are also paying 20 or 30 grand for their kids' education from age 5 on. So I understand in that situation, but over here, this is the land of the free, the home of the brave.
Well, so have you played screen golf in South Korea then?
I probably played it a dozen times, and you're kind of forced to, because if it's a company thing, you have to go. So you're in your like work clothes, kind of unbutton a couple buttons, and you go for it.
Right. Okay. And I'm not going to act like I'm an expert in this area at all. All I can tell you is what I've researched and what I've had conversations with people about, because I have not lived in South Korea and I've not been there. But what I will tell you is, South Korea has 500 golf courses. They have 50 million people. The United States has 15,000 golf courses, and we have 330 million people. There's 3.7 million people in South Korea that play indoor golf. That's about as much as the United States, really. I mean, the United States is off-course golf's quite a bit higher, but indoor golf in South Korea is very popular. From what I've been told, it's primarily because of the lack of the demand, and they don't have much more land to build golf courses on. And so there's enough golf simulator, indoor golf locations in South Korea. I read an article, it was from a few years ago, but still sort of probably relevant, is that they outnumber Starbucks 5-1. And essentially, there's an indoor golf location in South Korea on every corner.
Every random building, you have like a little bit, it'll say like screen golf, and you go to the basement, and then you're playing screen golf.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that's unique to South Korea. And I'm not sure that that's going to totally translate to the U.S. or other parts of the world, because the United States has room to build golf courses if we need to. And I think that's probably the primary driver. Now, I do think indoor golf will continue to grow because of the northern states and the climate. And also it's a quicker round and maybe a little bit cheaper. There's a little bit more entertainment with it. Can eat a cheeseburger or whatever and have a couple beers and not have to, get in a cart or walk or anything. So I think there is an appeal to it, but I think South Korea is unique in its own sense.
Well, so now you just brought up with Top Golf, one of the issues they had was extreme heat. Obviously with the simulators, you don't have that issue. But now let's transition right over into the whole TGL aspect. It's basically screen golf plus. Maybe they're going to do some extra fancy stuff. You got some sand trap area, you got some short game. But let's call it what it is. You got these dudes hitting into a screen. They're rotating in and out. So you won't necessarily get Tiger or Rory, which I'm fine with, Rory especially, playing every event. But you think that it's going to be successful? I'd love to hear the reasons.
Yeah, I do think it's going to be successful. And there's a couple tells here that I think are important. First of all, the media deal with ESPN, I think, is important from a distribution standpoint. And secondly, the investors that have invested are well-versed in the sports space. So they've been able to get pre-revenue or commitments for revenue off the top before they've started. Secondly, is if we look at off-course golf growth in the United States, it's growing much faster than on-course golf in the United States. And not only that, is off-course golf is more popular in the United States than on-course golf. So the demographic is much younger from an off-course golfer than an on-course golfer, something like 10, 15 years younger, skews even more It's about 40% female, 60% male. On-course golf is generally more male than that. So it's a more diverse demographic. It's a different demographic. And this is what I tell people all the time with TGL, because for whatever reason, it's become a pretty popular and almost divisive topic in golf. Like, it's cool if you don't like it. And that's the same thing with Top Golf. Like, I go to Top Golf like once a year. Like, I like to actually go out and touch grass and play. It's cool for me like once or twice a year. It's almost like a novelty. Like, I can go with friends. It's like going out to a bar, but it doesn't replace golf for me. What I think this does is it puts a time slot for ESPN that's 2 hours. It's about 15. It's going to be about 15 total. Well, they have the playoffs too, but 15 total matches. And I mean, I think it will generally do well. What is well? That's a great question. And I try to think about that. I think that I really believe that it will probably be around, and I could be totally wrong. And if I am, I'm happy to admit it. I do think it'll probably be around an NBA rating game is what it'll see, which is, 1.5 million people or so. I do believe that. Now, Tiger plays, I think that's easily attainable. He'll get a 30% pop over probably him not playing. So I think the TGL has a couple of things that they really need to focus on. First is how are they going to sustain the momentum after the launch and when Tiger doesn't play. Second is the tech. How are we going to ensure the tech doesn't fail when golfers are hitting the shots? And then third is we're going to mic these guys up, and these guys generally don't like to be mic'd up. And how is it going to be authentic and genuine? So if they can get just even like halfway okay on those, then I think that we'll see a second year of this and going forward. And you made the point about the Netflix Cup that was aired on Tuesday night. I've never really personally got into those matches, but for whatever reason, I'm looking more forward to TGL. Not to mention these guys are playing for money, so it's $9 million for the winning team, and that's a decent chunk of change. So I think there will be some competition there. I think it's not going to be for everyone, and that's cool. Like, if it's not for you, that's cool.
In terms of ESPN holding it or provide, hosting it, it's reminding me a little bit of the deal that the UFC did with ESPN, where now you're saturated because you promised, 45 events a year, but you've not guaranteed any like which fighters are going to be on the card. So all the free ESPN plus fights of USC, it's like, I don't know any of these fighters at all. And then you kind of like, you almost overdo it. Imagine how you'd feel about, and I'm the same way with you on Top Golf, once a year, twice a year, something like that. Like you're going bowling. Imagine you had to do it every Monday for 15 weeks in a row. By the end, you tap out. You say, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Okay. No, there's a lot to unpack there. And I can understand that perspective. Generally, just so you know, Pants, I've generally stayed away from the PGA Tour LIV battle because it's become so divisive, and it's unfortunate that golf's had to deal with it. I will say competition is good. Okay. Like, competition makes everybody better. It's unfortunate that we had to have competition to make something better. I'll leave it at that. And I can understand how some folks, may say like, I get what you're saying on some of the LIV guys, the anti-LIV, if you will, the guys on tour that were saying things, I guess, poorly about LIV. And I can see that. Look, I'm not sure when the idea originated. Mike McCarley may have said it on a recent podcast, but it's generally a response to LIV to get more money into some guys' pockets on the PGA Tour, and that's what the response was. It's how I took it. I could be wrong, but that's how I took it. And so I get your point. Now it's kind of like a LIV versus TGL thing now, which again is unfortunate. I think this will bring a different demographic into the game. That's what I'm hoping for, at least. And it'll be beneficial for everyone involved. If we look at the Aspen Institute came out with a study, ages 6 through 12. Golf was the second highest growing sport in the United States. And it's like a 35% growth rate. Like, to grow the game of golf, we really need to focus on juniors and females. And we've seen that over the last 2 to 4 years that is the segment of golf that's growing. And so I'll welcome most anything that's going to get a different demo into the game. And golf's changed a lot in the last 10 years. I remember, well, I won't go into too much detail, but golf's changed a lot in the last 10 years. I mean, it's not as much of this stuck up game that it used to be.
Well, you have in terms of growing the game, and you can see that obviously LIV had events overseas. I don't know if there was like 6 out of the 14 or so, but now you just see that basically now you have Max Homa going over to South Africa and winning. So it's weird how now we can say traveling overseas and winning tournaments helps grow the game, because we're both on the same wavelength. You want to see the game thrive. I know there was a big concern for a while without Tiger Woods that the numbers were declining. Then you get this COVID boom, and you want to keep that momentum going and get people to experience golf on any level, whether it be screen golf, Top Golf, what have you. But in terms of TGL, to me, I'm predicting by March there's some harsh headlines about the viewing numbers coming up about TGL, and we'll know by then because you'll be 3 or 4 events in.
Yeah,
or more. So
it would be probably about 6 in. Yeah, at that point, 6, 7.
So final question for you. I know you didn't really want to necessarily touch on it. The merger. I know you wanted to stay a little bit away from maybe the LIV and PGA Tour rivalry. With your understanding of the big picture of the business of golf, does it benefit both sides to come together? Do they come together? It's basically a 2-part question.
I think it does benefit them coming together. Look, here's what I'll say about LIV is that I think LIV can live without the PGA Tour. I think it's tough for the PGA Tour to live without LIV. And that may make no sense to anybody, but here's why I say that is the LIV is heavily financed. And I think that their game plan really should be outside the United States. And we saw what they did with Australia. There's a huge vacuum in Australia. And obviously you look at South Korea and Japan. I mean, golf's pretty popular in Asia. So I think if they were to focus on some of their tournaments, Australia, Asia, Middle East, they would have a really big corner in that market. And then they would have the ability to poach players away from the PGA Tour. So I do think that it benefits golf if they come together. My whole thing with LIV is having essentially a sovereign country owning a league. I don't care really what country it is, right? Like, I don't care if it's Canada. I don't care if it's Mexico, the United States. I just think that it gets a little bit tricky when we have a country essentially owning a league. And I think a lot of people got excited about, where the money was coming from. The PIF is everywhere. So I think we need to be careful about a lot of things that we say. Secondly, I just am a little concerned about a sovereign country as owning part of a league. That's really my take on it. Do we think the merger is going to get done? I don't think the merger is going to get done by the end of the year. Look, I have very novice business experience. The experience that I have pales in comparison to this. But when I've looked at LOIs or looked at other financial like acquisitions or mergers or anything like that, and Sims, this stuff takes forever. And I was stunned when I watched CNBC and they Yasser and Jay said, we think we can get it done in like 3 weeks, I think was the number. I was really, really shocked to hear that. Now, Jay had some health issues. I suppose that didn't help, but I don't think it gets done by the end of the year. I don't know ultimately what happens. I mean, if I had to guess, I mean, I would say that the deal probably doesn't get done at all.
We have the same mindset in terms of LIV doesn't really necessarily need the PGA Tour anymore. You lost the moral high ground once the PGA Tour agreed to accept the money. And at this point, you also see that the PGA Tour could easily just continue hanging itself by being associated with bad ideas. So if the TGL starts tanking, it's still associated with the PGA Tour. It kind of sullies the PGA Tour even more. So if anything, then maybe LIV wants to distance itself and continue if the LIV gets a few more players from the PGA Tour, another good 5 of the top 20 or so, you can arguably say that you have more of the stars in this 48-man league than the PGA Tour does, who, as you pointed out, the stars are the ones they're trying to funnel the money to. And they're going around these roundabout ways of doing it, TGL, the player impact program, the PIP money, where they can't, because they won't let themselves, in their bylaws, give appearance fees, which may potentially be due to the 501c6 status. So there's so many little moving parts they have to work around to just get these guys money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's really something. Like, I talked to the PGA Tour a year ago, and they told me that they had to dip into their reserves last year and then this year, and they're going to be break even from a cash flow standpoint in their financial models. And that obviously is not the case. I don't know what changed. Was it sponsors kind of pulling out of tournaments? Was it lawyers' fees racking up? I'm not sure what was really, what really happened there. But obviously they obviously called Yasser and said, hey, look, let's talk. And so they're trying to get a deal done, or at least it appears they're trying to get a deal done. Look, I think what ultimately happens is a few other groups come in and they're able to purchase a minority stake in the PGA Tour for how many ever billions of dollars. I'm not sure what the tour is going to be ultimately valued at, but the only question I have for that is how do those investors get their money back, right? Because this thing is not like it's going to IPO. Is it cash distributions and they're happy with that every year? Like when we buy a sports team in the United States, with one of the 4 major leagues, those turn over decades, like every 2 or 3 decades, they'll turn over to somebody else, right? They'll sell the team and they're going to get their money back. I don't know if you can do that with the PGA Tour. So I don't know. That's my only, I guess, counterpoint to myself is that does it actually make sense for somebody to go in and do that when I don't know how they get their investment back outside of a distribution every year from a media deal, but it would take, I would think, many years to make that investment back.
Folks, there's still so much undecided, ambiguous. At this point, it would just be a whole lot of speculation. Jared, it's been awesome having you on this episode of Big Boy Pants Golf, and I'm sure we'll have you on in the future to go through more of your newsletters.
Thanks for having me, Pants.